We've all heard this customer service speak that's like, thank you so much for contacting. And it's like, it's just fluff. It's like, we want to be like texting our friend, like, OMG, did you see this shit? Like,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to D2C Growth Mode, a podcast by Miyamoto where you learn from D2C experts, tactics, and skills to master your growth journey. Our guest today is Ren Fuller-Wasserman. Ren is the Director of Experience at one of my favorite brands, Tushy. She's been working with D2C brands for the past 10 years after having spent the first decade of her career working in academia as a researcher and then as a teacher. I'm so excited to speak to her today and learn about how she's leading the experiences strategy for this bidet brand that turned out to be one of the coolest brands out there. Thank you so much for being here today, Ren.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Let's start right at the beginning. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Do you remember that? And then how did that turn out?
I think my very first aspiration was to be a helicopter pilot. I grew up in rural West Virginia, and that always fascinated me. So still on my bucket list. But I think for most of my life, I wanted to be an artist and aggressively pursued that. I thought I might be a fashion designer or, famous artist in New York City. But my creative path took me elsewhere.
Cool. But still doing art in a different way, I guess, like talking to people and being creative about how to make people feel welcome and connected to you.
Art takes all forms. Yeah. Now building experiences.
Nice. Exactly. Cool. And you were an English teacher as well for 6 years in Argentina. And I love that because I was also an English teacher back in Brazil for around the same amount of time, actually. And I think teaching and marketing have so much in common. And when I think of marketing, it's really like being out there, connecting yourself to the market as a brand. So I kind of include customer experience in it. In fact, I started studying like consumer behavior and all of that back when I was teaching English, because I thought I wanted to understand how people made decisions and how learning kind of occurred in the brain. And I'm curious to hear how you kind of apply what you've learned as a teacher, in the classroom, to building experiences today and creating empathy and just creating like the best experience you can.
I think being a teacher gave me a really solid base to connect with people in a different way, because a lot of what I learned about as a teacher doesn't matter your pedagogical style, the lessons you want to teach. If you can't get the kids to pay attention, like, you're dead in the water. And so I think a lot of it was about how to captivate them and how to build bonds with them. The first month of any school year, I would spend getting to know them really well. And my first years, I didn't have that tactic. And it would be, learning from the teachers around me, a lot of screaming and frustration and, breaks taken away. And then when I learned that magical touch of like how to build relationships with my students and get to know them for them, they were so much more engaged, and my, journey as a teacher really changed. And so I think using that same application towards marketing or customer experience, it's like, what gets someone excited? What gets them to pay attention? What gets them to believe in you, to trust in you? And I think across the board, it can be really similar. At the end of the day, it's all human psychology and human relationships, right? What attracts people. And so I think, if you have a little bit of psychology under your belt as a marketer, there's a lot that you can start to understand in a different way beyond, metrics and analytics. That it's easy to reduce it all to a tech stack and following this playbook. But I think what I am like a huge fan of is it all comes back to human connection and how you can make those connections.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I completely agree with that. And not too long ago, I actually got the opportunity to speak to 𝐀𝐛𝐨𝐿, and she mentioned that one of the most relevant skills that she looks for when she is hiring someone or looking for a business partner is the entrepreneurial spirit. And from your kind of career and journey, I kind of get that you have a lot of that too. And I wanted to hear a little bit about who who maybe inspired you to kind of build that spirit? Was it something inherited, or was it something that you kind of had to exercise and build in a way?
I think it's definitely grown over the years, but I would say in early childhood, I was really impacted by a few people in my family, principally my dad, who's an antiques picker. And I'm the oldest of three. And I grew up in rural West Virginia, where it was pretty common for him and I to tool around and just go knocking on doors. Like, can we look and see what's in your barn? Kind of like American picker style. Those are his contemporaries. And so, my father has a big beard and a long braid, and it can be kind of, it's not somebody anyone wants to open the door to. And so, with a 3 to 5 year old little girl, it was like, oh, sure, we'll let you poke around in our barn to see if there's any motorcycles or anything fun. And, learning through him of like, you can do anything, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, but also like the power of human relationships and kindness. Through, seeing him. And then, as I got older, going with him to antique shows in New York and seeing how he interacted with people at these high-powered antique shows, that was a really early foray into, wow, you can come from West Virginia, like we lived on a fully sustainable farm with no electricity, but here we were, selling high-powered antiques to, some of the penthouses in New York City. And so, and he got this, I believe, from his father, who had a general store in New Jersey. It was Wasserman's store. And it was, there was a bus stop called Wasserman's. And so I grew up also with my grandfather, who was one of the founding members of SCORE, the Senior Corps of Retired Executives. And a lot of what he did was mentor entrepreneurs. And this is before people used the word entrepreneurship, right? I remember when I was younger, they would say, I'm self-employed or I have my own business, right? And I think entrepreneurship, this word came into the cultural zeitgeist, I don't know, late 90s, early aughts. But yeah, I think my father and my grandfather, it was always like, you can do whatever you set your mind to, but it's always going to come back to human relationships and how you treat people and the bonds that you build and for people to trust in you.
That's perfect. That's perfect that you kind of ended that beautiful story with like how important it is to bond with people, because I'm actually curious about your take on the different opportunities that you get across like the customer journey to kind of connect and bond with people and your audience. And I wonder what, in your opinion, is the difference between working with customer experience and having a customer experience strategy and having a customer support structure? What is the difference between those two?
That's one of my favorite questions. I think customer service, customer support is status quo. What every business that deals with people, basically all of them, have to have. But customer experience and why we at Tushy call it customer experience is thinking about the holistic customer journey, that every touch point is an opportunity to engage and delight and surprise and really build brand ambassadorship, and understanding that by and large, most customers won't ever touch the support team, right? But they will have a lot of facets to the customer experience, from seeing it in an Instagram ad to then going to our website and chuckling at some of the things there to then, maybe chatting up our team, but maybe just looking at a product description page, placing an order, unboxing a box that makes you laugh when you open it up, looking at the instruction manual, this is our instruction manual. It's very irreverent how to put this shit together. We've all seen instruction manuals. Usually they're not the most helpful. And we're like, how can we take something really boring and make it absolutely delightful? Another touch point in the box, we have this book, This Number Two Shall Pass. It's literally like astrology and just things to read while you're on the toilet. And understanding that, people typically reach out when there's a problem, but beyond that, we want them to feel like we're thinking about you. We want to connect with you, but not everyone needs to connect. And I think, it's really thinking about the experience, but from every facet. It doesn't just fall on the customer support team. It's up to marketing, to creative, to operations, to make sure that packages are arriving on time. But I think even within that, I'm a very strong believer that a perfect experience doesn't make for the strongest brand love. sometimes those experiences can be very forgettable. But when you have a bad experience and you reach out to a customer service team, customer experience team, and you have a really surprising or delightful experience, like, oh, I didn't expect them to do that. That's oftentimes what can make the biggest impression. And so what I teach my team is, make sure that every touch point we have with the customer is always a value add. If you find that you're just sending along a canned response, like that's not the best work. A bot can do that. And so we want to make sure that, oftentimes they're reaching out because there is a problem, that we're going above and beyond, all of these cliches, surprise and delight, above and beyond. But I think these really are opportunities where someone, can have a flub, but be like, wow, this brand, like this is the greatest experience I've had with the brand of late. And so, yeah, I think it's putting those steps in place. So at every step of the journey, there's like, oh, this is breaking from the mold and providing like a new memory of like, this is different from every other e-commerce experience I've had, but also understanding that if it's not perfect, it's okay. If you have a strong team that can trust their gut and know when to be menschy, as we say, and go above and beyond.
Yeah. I feel like anyone who's worked with like customer service or in B2C or D2C, the B2C or D2C world as a whole, has seen that happen. Like how if you kind of go a little bit, kind of surprise the customer in a way, they actually become more loyal to you because that memory, the frustration is really strong, but then the satisfaction after something that you did not expect to happen, when that happens, is actually even bigger than whatever just the full pleasure that you would get out of just a different experience.
Yeah, we find that customers are often just screaming into the void, not expecting a response, especially in the digital age. If it's in person or it's on the phone, it's different. But email, it's hard to know what the response is going to be. And I think sometimes people are so surprised, like, oh, there's a real human there, and you can not only do what I'm asking, but do something that I didn't expect. And that really, forms a lasting memory, ideally.
Yeah. Can you share an example with us of something that your team has done that kind of like went that way?
Let's see. We have such a unique product and we're really trying to change culture. So we're always looking for those opportunities. Recently, a woman reached out saying how she had a 40-year-old daughter who has Down syndrome and explained that because of her Down syndrome, her arms are shorter. And so for most of her life, she's always had trouble wiping. And so her mother shared just like how since they've installed the Tushy, her life has been so much easier and she's had real independence in the bathroom and she's taught her this whole routine. And she's now able to move out to a group home of other similarly abled people. And she was talking about how she wanted to install the Tushy there if it fit. And it's like, that's a perfect opportunity for us to be like, you're not buying this. Like, we want you to have this. Like, we know this will change your life. So we're donating to the group home that she's going to be in. And I think it's just these little things that, she wasn't asking for that. In fact, she gave us some product feedback that was really helpful to share with our product design team. Like, I love you, but I noticed this and, thinking about my daughter and where she's going. And so these are the kind of, relationships that we want to foster for people to understand that we're a small business. We're not a huge corporation. We're still very in touch with every customer when we want to be. Another experience was a family reached out, their whole house had burned down and they were in the process of getting things back in order. And they sent a picture of their whole house charred, the Tushy still intact on a toilet. And they're like, we just need this poly hose that goes to the sink. And I'm like, that's insane that a Tushy can survive a fire, but like, all you need is a poly hose, like your clothes all burned up. Sorry, I'm going to send you guys all, ask me about my butthole shirts, a full suite of products. And when you get your house back in order, like your bathroom's going to be like the sexiest, coolest bathroom in Idaho, I think it was. But things like this, where it's just, a simple email like, hey, I needed this thing. And where we can see opportunities to really insert ourselves and show them that we're a brand with heart that gives a shit, which I think we don't always have this opportunity, but that's what makes my job really fun.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for those two stories. I've got goosebumps all over. So cool. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and that's exactly what I kind of love about Tushy as well, because when I actually got the leaflet, so we bought Tushy when we first arrived here in the US, and my partner actually did a thorough research on all the options out there. He was very excited about all of this. And then when it first arrived, the box, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's like almost Christmas, because there are like these little kind of surprises everywhere. And then when I opened the leaflet, I was just like, I can't even throw this out. Like, how am I going to throw this out? This is art. This is talking to me. It's like my friend now. And I wonder, like, how do you kind of train the team to create like that kind of consistent experience all over throughout different channels?
Yeah, I love how you said, this is my friend, because that's exactly the tone we're going for. We talk to everyone like they're our best friend. And this comes from our founder, 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐿 𝐸𝐺𝐸, and Chief Creative Officer. Like from day one, she's like, you have to talk to people like you would your bestie, We've all heard this customer service speak that's like, thank you so much for contacting. And it's like, it's just fluff, it's like, we want to be like texting our friend, like, OMG, did you see this shit? Like, and this is how we talk to people. We talk to them also like they would talk to us, right? If they're cursing, like, we know we can use curse words. If they're not, we don't want to be like too cheeky in their face. But I think understanding that the topic that we're addressing, by and large, people aren't talking about it with anyone, right? If you have a dog or a baby, all of a sudden you talk about poop all the time. Did the dog go poop? How many times did the baby poop? Did you clean her diaper? What did it look like? But our own bowel movements, like if we're lucky, we're all doing it at least one time a day, but nobody talks about it. And we don't know what we do behind the bathroom doors. And so we realize that, in North America, it's taboo, but we have a product that we know is going to change people's lives. So how can we get them to open up, or at least be open to hearing about these concepts? And we realize through humor is going to be a big way, but also being very approachable and relatable. We don't use big fancy words, and we try to talk to everyone like we would our friend or our mom, and I think there are different facets of the brand voice. In a public facing way, like in social media and marketing content, it is probably cheekier and a little sassier. And then from the customer experience, in email and chat, it's a little bit more lovey-dovey, a little bit more supportive, because I think the important thing for us is changing culture and recognizing that most people in North America don't even know how to say the word bidet, let alone consider buying one and installing one in their toilet. So we never want to turn people off or make people feel like they're being talked down to, or like, what do you mean you don't know what this is? Like, and from our customer side, there's a lot of, this is totally TMI. And we're like, there is no TMI around here. Like, we've seen it all and we want to help you. And oftentimes what they think is TMI is like, they're talking about how to wipe. And you're like, we know that you don't usually talk about this with anyone. But yeah, it's being approachable, being relatable, feeling accessible, and that we can meet people where they are. So they can talk to us via email, via chat, via SMS, WhatsApp, on the phone. We even do video installation support, recognizing that a lot of people aren't super handy. And so we want to guide them through that process, and we'll meet you on Google Hangout in your bathroom to just give you words of encouragement, and probably end up talking about your cat or your toddler that wanders in. And it's just a really awesome opportunity to engage and bond with our customer community that in this digital e-commerce space is so rare outside of like in-person activations, which, I joined Tushy in peak COVID, so there wasn't a lot of that. And so where we can build these digital spaces for connection is so important.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned about engagement and how you're kind of like helping, even going on a live call with people and helping them install it, because I do feel like that is it's so sometimes so underrated how important people actually using your product is, because like we a lot of times just want to sell a product, and then after it's sold, like that's great, it's sold. But if it's just sitting there, people are not using it, they're not going to refer this to other people, they're not going to buy another one, and probably if and this is probably a problem that not only like a bidet that is a more complex kind of product has, but even if you sell like yogurt and then it goes bad in people's fridge, that's it. It wasn't used. People are not going to buy it again. Probably that happens a lot with salad, by the way. Like how sometimes it just looks bad, and then you think twice before getting another package. So so I wonder, like, what would be your tips or advice or tactics that you use to kind of help people engage with the product and actually use it?
That's a great question, because that is our number one goal, for people to use and enjoy bidets, not to sell bidets, right? And I think that has been always a hurdle for us. People are like, oh, I love this thing. They see the Instagram ads and they're like, or they see it at a friend's house and they're really called to it. But at the end of the day, it is a cultural shift. Most people have never used one. They've lived their whole lives without one. And so it's like, they got it, but then it's like, it's going to take some time. Like, okay, I'm going to dedicate, half an hour on my Saturday to like sit down, crawl underneath the toilet and do this. And while we know it's super easy, it's still also like, well, I didn't have it before. And so that's the hurdle that we want to overcome. And so I think it's, being very accessible, having people trust us, when we give them advice, that's like, oh, that's exactly what my friend who's a plumber told me. Like, okay, now I trust you guys. Or I ran this by my father-in-law who's a Navy engineer, and like he said that he agrees too. It's like making sure that our team is very expert. And when we're not, sharing those vulnerabilities. You know what? That's the first time we've seen this 1965 RV. Like, we think we can get it in there, but let me check with my engineering team and make sure and give you some proper guidance. Because I think just thinking from a sales side, like, returns in this world are a common thing, and they're easier to do. So just because you purchase a product doesn't mean you're going to follow through with it. And so I think it's, being sure that you have all the resources there. And so, a really strong instruction manual. And with that, we have QR codes that you can scan that go to steps of installation via video, that also have like written steps on those videos. We have this video installation service that you can set up an appointment with us. You can also have just like a video consultation ahead of time to see if your bathroom is a good match for the bidet that you're looking at, if your toilet will pair well, which 99% of toilets do, but sometimes it's just like this extra confidence boost. We've had customers as old as 100 getting bidets for their first time. We had a woman that for her 101st birthday was going to get a Tushy after her son took her to Japan for her 100th birthday, and she fell in love with bidets. And we're like, that's insane. This woman for a century has been pooping wrong, in our words. And so it's understanding that like we're to change culture. It's not just buy this thing. They have to feel like there's a reason for it. And, using a bidet, like everybody has a reason why they want to, like to feel more clean, to have a moment of luxury in their day, to save money on toilet paper, which is one of the most expensive consumer goods, to save trees. That TP is often made from hardwood trees. So there's something that everyone can attach onto of like why, but I think that hurdle oftentimes is difficult. And so that's where my team comes in, and it's understanding like without us, this would be a lot harder. And so, but also inserting moments of delight. Like in the instruction manual, there's a full Spotify playlist of all Tushy specific songs. So like, you might be frustrated, like craning your neck in weird ways underneath the toilet, but then like a total banger comes on that's about pooping and you're like, what is this? This is insane.
Oh, cool. I wish it was harder for us to kind of install it so that we would have to go through that experience. But unfortunately, it was really
That's
easy.
Great. I love to hear that.
Oh, no. Yeah. And so let's think of our audience right here, like founders and customer experience professionals or even marketers. What are the questions that you think they should ask themselves if they want to stand out in their customer experience?
Yeah, I think, what are you providing that's new that people haven't seen before? Like, what are you solving for? I think everyone, well, in the world I'm in, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, right? But copying a product that already exists it's not probably going to be the most successful thing. Like, what are you solving for? And is it really a problem? And some problems are really hard to solve. I worked for a local food company before, right? To solve, get everyone access to local food. That's a really big problem to try to think about on a global level. But if your problem is, we want everyone to have a clean beehole, like that is, this is how we're getting to it, great. But it takes a long time, right? Tushy's been around for 8 years. So I think it's thinking, what are you solving for? And to get attention, are you doing something that makes new memories, right? People remember things when it breaks from the script. And, our founder's playbook, Mickey, it's always been doing really sensational things, like if we're not getting a cease and desist, we're probably doing it wrong, right? We don't want to be offensive, and that's our tactic. We've done things like this year we had, Asshole Activist. It was a gallery showing of portraits done by a professional photographer of our customers' anuses. And at first, they were beautiful. They looked kind of like topographic photos. And we had a really successful gallery opening in Toronto. And people were like, oh, what am I looking at? And it was all for World Climate Day. And just trying to make people conscientious of how detrimental toilet paper usage is to the environment. And this was like very sensational, certainly not for everyone, but things like this, if you can break the internet, but sometimes it's really thinking outside of the box. If you're doing what every other brand has done, it's probably not going to call people's attention. And maybe that's not your goal, but I think it's thinking about, what are you solving for? Do people really need this? And if you have values that back your business, I think that's also really helpful too. Guiding what is your mission? It comes back to these values. And if you're not upholding this, then it probably doesn't make sense to do. And how can you give something new to people? And I think at an early stage, starting with really niche audiences. For us, it's like everyone with a butthole, which is really massive, right? But when we started in the early days, it was talking to IBS and Crohn's sufferers. It was talking to gay men. It was talking to the differently abled. And so now it's much more, 8 years in, we can talk to everyone. But in the early days, like some of our strongest evangelists were these very specialized demographics that really needed this because it had a clear use case in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And I imagine that a lot of times you have to make a decision that doesn't necessarily go with the protocol, but it's like kind of like a gut decision that you have to make, especially because you're dealing with people, different contacts, and stories that just use cases that you never heard of or are not in the protocol at all. So how do you kind of deal with that? And how important do you think it is to kind of recognize that kind of gut instinct and go and follow it?
Super important. In fact, it's one of our values to be menschy. So mensch is a Yiddish word that is a person who does things with integrity, is honorable, and that plays especially into our CX values in a major way, meaning something might not follow protocol, but in your gut, it tells you it's the right thing to do, right? Like the cases I mentioned before around the fire and the daughter moving to the group home, or, in recent years, I've been in the hospital with COVID and I missed the return window, okay, you're only a week out, like, absolutely, we understand. And these are things that they don't align with our protocol, but we know that word of mouth travels really far and people have great experiences. They share them. So this is part of our brand DNA, and flexibility, understanding. And that's, why my team, we're all real pooping humans. Like, we rely on automations to a degree, but a lot of this higher level of connection is always going to come from a human intervening and understanding that there's nuance and when to be flexible, and, looking at a customer history, does it make sense for the person that's already returned 3 times to be menschy? Probably not. But, when they've spent a good deal of money with us, or we have a stronger relationship with them, or we know where it's going, like, of course, this is an investment. It's not a loss. And I think That's the biggest thing. Is I think people think about CX or customer service as a cost center, and I, as well as a lot of other CX leaders, really believe it's a really strong revenue driver these days. When people trust in you and they're relying on you, and you're telling them like, "Oh, just get this thing." It can either be through upselling or just, I trust this brand and I know they've got my back. So like this one product has been solid and I love it. Like everything that they launch, I'm going to buy because I know Ren's on the other side if I have any problems. So yeah, that's kind of how we approach that. It's really like human, and like, what does my gut say? Be benchy. We're applicable.
Yeah. And how does that translate into like day-to-day decision making and even like strategy, I would say, because it feels like it goes, you have to kind of be in touch and in unison with a lot of other areas in the company. So how do you like go around doing that?
So tapping on another one of our values, think holistically. I think of CX as like the hub in the wheel with the spokes going out to all the other different departments. And I always say the Purus are support agents. They're the eyes and ears on the ground. So they're tracking lots of things. But if we're not sending that to the other departments, like they're going to be a little bit flat-footed. And so I think having really strong feedback loops, but them also understanding, just because they saw it once doesn't mean, it's a fire that needs to be put out. And so being very data-driven. But I think, something that we say a lot is think holistically, okay, these spare parts we're ordering in, it's like, I don't need to understand about inventory at this like small level, but my colleague will always check in with me and let me know, because it's like, oh, did we think about the sale that's coming up, that there might be higher volume of this product that requires this spare part? And so that's where it's like ops, marketing, CX really in lockstep, and understanding that each decision impacts another department, some in major ways, some in minor ways, and some that they didn't consider necessarily, but it's always good to share out. So I think also like our team that's remote hybrid, over communicating and just really thinking holistically, like better to overshare and it not be necessary than, oops, I didn't mention, this container is delayed and now this really impacts everything down the line.
And is there like maybe a process that you kind of started using as a team that kind of changed things? So something that you had like maybe a problem before with like how this where this information was kind of going, or maybe it wasn't going anywhere. And then there was like maybe the simple kind of process that you just like started using and then got like this big change in impact.
I think two things that we started doing this year was just really strong feedback loops between CX and product, tracking like product reviews, NPS scores, warranty issues, what are the most common contact reasons and resolutions, and just having a monthly cadence where, when they see things in maybe just a tag report, it's like, oh, cool, that's up 2%. But when there's a monthly connect and there's some background of like this one case, like this was the anecdotal story behind it. But also, working with them to, okay, we've noticed this trend. Can we then reach out to customers who have had this issue to share with them a prototype, for example, and see what they think? We did this recently that people were like, oh, the water is too cold. And so it's like, okay, we're going to send out a survey and we're going to send them this new product and see, water will still be cold, but maybe like this iteration that we're doing, you might enjoy more, and not just rely on our engineers' expertise and our team's expertise, but like really engage the customer in a meaningful way, that these are really memorable brand experiences as well. Not only valuable feedback for us, because I think sometimes you just get too in the weeds and you're like really focused on something and you have to zoom out and remember like most people have no idea what we're talking about. They have no idea how this works. And like when you put it in the hands of a non-expert, it's like you get all of this really rich feedback. I think another thing that was a really beautiful evolution was ticket fields. We moved away from this tagging feature in Gorgeous, the help desk that we use, to ticket fields, which is kind of like tagging, but it compels every agent every single time to put a contact reason and a resolution, and sharing that out with my full team every week. It's like you can really start to notice trends, that this was a valuable tool for me to be able to say, like, this is the change we need to make to the website. Like recently, one was consistently every week, one of the top reasons was, where does the warm water come from on the spa? And we had tons of written information about it. We had videos about it, and we had a diagram, but it wasn't a visual that was front and center. So after, the third or fourth week reporting on this, our web director and creative director were like, let's just pop into our shootable bathroom. We have this studio that opens up in our office that's like a collapsible bathroom that looks like a real bathroom set, but when we're not using it, we can just move the toilet out and fold up the wall. And so they made a shot that was sync, very clearly connected to the spa, and you could see the poly hose and the whole connection. And immediately within the first week, we saw that wasn't a top query at all. It dropped by like 92%. And so it was like, this is the kind of iterative thinking that I'm really happy that we've gotten to. But I think a lot of it comes from a team that's willing to listen and understand the importance of CX, like being data driven, knowing which tools to harness to be able to track these things, having an effective way to share out this information, and then just like a repetitive cadence and tracking and then proving this worked or this didn't work. And so ideally every week we have little wins like this that might seem small, but when your team doesn't have to focus on where does the hot water come from, they can talk about bigger things like how to train your toddler to use a bidet, or, how to install it on your 1965 RV.
Cool. Yes. And are there any brands out there that actually inspire you regarding customer experience? They are doing a great job. And from your experience, what can we learn from those brands?
Yeah. I think one that has really caught my eye of late is Vacation, the sunscreen brand. They have this they only have a few products that are sunscreen that is kind of very 80s smelling, like coconut, Miami Beach, but they really leaned into what I thought were just a few ads that I'd seen that were very 80s, like country club, going to play tennis, like luxurious, 80s Miami. The whole thing, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but everything about the brand comes from like the desk of this guy, the voice of this guy that lives in the 80s. And like it's like got a letterhead, and they just really lean into it a lot. So it's not just a marketing campaign. It's like you're stepping back into this like luxurious, have a mimosa on the tennis court and like use my sunscreen, and then we'll go on my yacht, and like everything is in his voice as if you're just like stepping into his world, which I thought was the first brand I've seen in a while where it's like you're actually living in their world. It's not trying to meet you. It's like, no, you have to step in to what they're doing. And then I think there's like Girlfriend Collective, yoga wear brand. I think what they do, they have like recycled leggings and bras, but they do drops of like different colors, and they get their community to vote on which colors, and they're limited runs. And so I think that's really interesting from a sustainability and engagement perspective of like, oh, I hope this one comes back. And there's like a whole collectability aspect to it of like, do you have all the colors? I'm not into super athleisure, but my sister-in-law is a cycling instructor, so she has like a million sets. And I just think like, if you can engage people in that way, it's really exciting. I think Seed, this probiotic, prebiotic, I think this is a harder world to take on of like food and also like medical claims loosely, and like explaining like high level science, but making it really down to earth and like different from their design to the way they talk about things and sustainability, and, get people to engage in a subscription product that isn't cheap, but I think it's really thoughtful the way they do it. And yeah, I think Patagonia just in general, I'm like obsessed with that brand, but their whole MO is like, don't buy our things, which is very antithetical to what a marketer does. But I think them really digging in deep to, these are our values, Mother Earth is our only stakeholder and we're investing in that. And if you're on board with it, great. But like, here's how you can refurbish your stuff. And I think, yeah, when brands' values can come through like that, it makes me want to spend my money with them in limited fashion, like they ask.
Yeah. And how do you think? So imagine that we're talking here to just new business owners that just have this idea of this product they want to sell. They're trying to figure out their values. They're not 100% sure of what their pillars are right yet. What kind of advice do you think could be useful for them to actually get to those words or phrases that will help them kind of make decisions from now to their future?
Yeah, I think a doodle pad and like remembering why you got there in the first place and just writing down things. At Tushy, it's been an iterative process, but I've also been at companies where they've hired huge agencies to do 6-month projects to come up with these things. I think there's a lot of ways to do it. I would say that way probably isn't the most authentic to the reason that you're doing it. And I think oftentimes it's going to go back to those very first days of like, why are you doing this? Why do you feel that the world can't live without whatever you want to sell? And then iterating upon that, bouncing it off of other people. And then as your team grows, like what resonates with your employees, the way you've always been saying something, from your space in life might not resonate with your team, or it might become passé as, the world changes. And I think we've seen that with certain brands, cuss words used to be really cool and hip. And, is it something that you would feel comfortable having emblazoned on your wall, or is that going to read very like 2000s when, it's there for 20 years? So I think a lot of it's going to go back to your true, like, why. But I think making it relatable and not too many, like at Tushy, we have 5, some companies have 10 to 20. And are you going to be able to uphold all of those values when there's a myriad of them? But I think for us, it's a guiding light of decision-making, when there's a point that we get to where we're a little bit like, I don't know if we should go this way or that way. It's like, well, our values say this, so let's rely on that. And doesn't mean it's always going to work out, but that helps people oftentimes get to alignment. So I think, yeah, checking your gut and going back to the core of like, why are you doing this? And yeah, looking back at those early notebooks that I just moved into a new house, and my husband and I, that we've both been entrepreneurs most of our career, found these early notebooks, and we were just laughing about like, he started a juice bar and it was like the why of the juice bar and some early recipes. And it's pretty cool to look back on those things too. So yeah, never take for granted these doodle books.
Yeah. And I wonder if it also works to go like the kind of like the negative, I would say, kind of path, which would be like to ask yourself, what is it that is bothering you? What are you complaining about that you kind of want to change, right? So that kind of helps.
Absolutely. Kind of I think it can be both sides. Like, what are you solving for? What do you want to create in a positive way? Or like, what do you not want to have to deal with anymore? And is that really a problem that enough people are dealing with that you think you can have a business? And, it could be a lifestyle business that in your community is great, that isn't applicable to the rest of the world, or some of these things can become wildly scalable. But yeah, I think either end of the spectrum, definitely.
Cool. And I was actually wondering about how Tushy's been doing in the past years, like in terms of growth. And I'm curious about what kind of goals do you usually set for the team and for the business for like short term and long term? And is long term relevant at all, like the 5-year kind of goal setting? And how is that process like for you to actually make those decisions?
Yeah. So I joined Tushy in March of 2020, which was, a crazy time. Tushy had been around for a while, I think 5 or 6 years at that point. But it had been, and I had come to Tushy because I was a user. I'd got my first Tushy in 2017 and it changed my life. And I brought it, I was living in Mexico City at the time. But with COVID and the toilet paper shortage that the US experienced, that pushed people into mass adoption of bidets, right? A country that by and large hadn't ever heard of it. All of a sudden we're like, there's no toilet paper. What's the alternative? And so people were discovering bidets, and that led to some really busy, chaotic, beautiful years at Tushy. And that's also, when I decided to stay at Tushy, I was building a travel startup, and I thought, I'll take this customer service job for a couple of weeks until COVID passes. And then saw there's a ton of opportunity here. And I think, our end goal is for every household in North America to have a bidet. So it's pretty lofty. And, we've sold over 1 million to date, but there's still, 380 million households to go, not even toilets. So I think, we started as a Shopify only store, and now we're in, Walmart and some other big box stores. And I think that will only continue. But I think it's thinking about, ubiquity for Tushy and other bathroom products, right? We make bamboo toilet paper and coconut husk scrubbing, toilet scrubber, all sustainable items to make your bathroom a more pleasant place. So want to see that grow. But I think, we're in an interesting time. Like macroeconomic climate is has been a roller coaster. So predictability from one year to the next can be very difficult. For my team, just thinking about the holidays, which are really busy for us. I look at the numbers every year, how many agents will I need on my team? And that's always been a crapshoot of we'll just see what happens. And I think now we're getting a little bit to greater stasis. But for my team, the things that I look at are CSAT, customer satisfaction to me is king, and net promoter score, and making sure that that's upheld, as well as first response time. We know that we're living in an Amazonified world. People want things when they want them really quickly, but also quality over quantity. That's one of the phrases I say every single day. So when people do reach out to our team, it's okay if we don't have the response right away, if it's something more involved, as long as people know that we have their backs and they can trust us. But I think it is becoming more challenging as we move away from being strictly online, from a Shopify store that has, email flows that we can really speak to you in a very specialized way, to if you buy us on the shelf at CVS, it's going to be a very different customer journey. And will you get the help that you need? And so I think it's thinking about solving for those kind of scenarios. And, QR codes, I think that's been really interesting how during COVID, QR codes were adopted by everyone just because of, menus and lack of touch. And so things that used to be really hard to explain to non-tech people, COVID ushered in an era where a lot of things are easy. And so incorporating QR codes onto a box. So you might not ever have a welcome flow from us, from, our emails, but you can access all of the same information and have an equally delightful experience should you choose to. So I think with any brand, as they grow and they get more out there, it's that's great. I hear from friends we're in Whole Foods now. It's oh, that's great. And they're not really, because we can't talk to the customers as much. So I think it's this dance of losing control, but also growing. And so just being really thoughtful with the materials that come with your product, and understanding something so simple as instruction manual, make sure it's explicit, because this might be your only touch point that you have with the customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for these customers that actually hear about Tushy from retailers, do you also try to kind of get them to subscribe in some way and connect with you guys in a more through a channel that you have more ownership of? Is that also a goal, or do you kind of let go and kind of trust the
Yeah,
booklet.
well, I would love for that to happen. So throughout the booklet and the box, it's like DM us, post your favorite message
okay.
on Instagram, like what you call your bidet, right? Like when you open the box, there's all these delightful phrases, synonyms for the bidet. So like there's a lot of calls to action of like what we want to happen, but I think it's different when it's in your inbox versus when it's on a box, right? And I think it also depends on your age and how familiar you are with using social media channels and your phone. And so that's why, scanning the QR codes, that leads to landing pages. And there's a lot of, different help. Like you can rely on TaskRabbit if you need help installing. You can set up a video install call, or like, here's all the videos, or did you know we have these other products that would really support your bidet, like a bamboo bum towel is super soft if you want to be like super sustainable, or did you know we sell toilet paper? And soon we're going to start putting like toilet paper samples in the box. This is a product that people love, but because we don't currently have samples, it's like, well, how can I try this? It's like, oh, well, you could buy an 8-pack, but not everybody wants to commit to that. So I think it's thinking about how can you let people have a taste of what you're doing. But I think because it's all in the digital space and being shipped, there's certain things that can be more, can be harder to solve for than if you're at the farmer's market per se.
Yeah. And are there any tactics that you tried that actually did not work out as you imagined?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of things. I think like AI is something that, a year ago, it was like every email I opened, I felt like was all AI. And it was, at that time, it was like, oh, we need to build out a bathroom in the metaverse because this is where the world is going, right? Like I had one colleague that left and he went to work for a company and he was like, I'm building out my office in the metaverse and I have an Oculus headset so I can receive clients. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this where we're really going? And it felt like we were. And now that's kind of cooled off a little bit. And I think we've had some really successful experiences with AI and some that were not. And I think in my recent conversations, it's understanding like AI is great, but humans are always going to be required to intervene in certain aspects of this. And so now I think I'm in this phase of like finding that balance of what do we want to automate? Where does AI support us? And where are humans absolutely necessary? And like one experience, like my team loves ChatGPT and we rely on it a lot. We had a customer that reached out, asking for an exception, but she wrote it in Shakespearean verse. She had some issue that she was asking for the Tushy to be replaced. And Cheryl, my colleague, used ChatGPT to copy the exact style. And they had this like 6 to 8 email exchange back and forth, like in Shakespearean verse that I have no doubt she told all of her friends about. Right. But I was like, this is the power of these tools. It's not to pretend you're working, but really to up level your work in a way that she might not have been able to on her own. And so, I think I think a lot of things is when you put these programs into place, thinking about like the video installation option, that's been really fun for the people that we've done it for, but it hasn't been wildly popular. And it's like, you have to ask, like, is it because people don't need the service? Is it because it wasn't as front and center as it could be? Is it because people's emails are like, they're being barraged by things all day long? So I think, the more you can learn from your customers and pull them and better understand, I think that to me, like feedback is a gift. And oftentimes it's negative feedback, but that to me is the most actionable. Love letters are great. We like to receive those. But when people say like, I love you, but XYZ, like that's where we can really iterate and improve. It's learning to listen and be able to take actionable items out of feedback that sometimes it can just get stuck in the anecdotal.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, Ren, thank you so much. I've been enjoying this conversation so much, so I kind of don't want it to end, but I do have some final quick questions for us. I have three final questions. So the first one is, if you could design a beautiful mural in a spot in the city that you really, really like, that could say anything, what would you like to be featured right there?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one and I have to give it to Etsy because they took the words from my mouth. There's a mural in Dumbo around the corner from the Tushy office that says, make commerce human. I think that's what it says. And it just really hit me. And I remember I was leaving the office late one night. It was like 10:30. I walked by it and I was like, this is why I'm doing what we're doing. You know, we're in a time, especially since COVID, where life feels very transactional and there's not a lot of human engagement. So where you can insert humanity back into transactions, like that's what I live for. And I think, you know, oftentimes we're speaking to chat bots, but you know, our team, it's like, are you a bot? Like, no, I'm a real pooping human, you know? And like they drop a butt joke and it's like these, you know, we're helping them with the transaction probably, but it doesn't have to feel transactional. So I think, yeah, spreading more love and making people realize like life is about relationships. So cherish them, nurture them, even if it's just a Puru support agent on the other side, like you probably have something in common and you could connect on something.
Cool. Thank you. And what if you had infinite budget to create the most spectacular customer experience in the world for a brand? Where would you start? What would be the first thing that you would do? And what would be the last thing that you would do?
Well, I think the first thing that I would do was, once I had the idea, hire a badass to be my first CX agent, because I just think that's like fundamental basis of the business, to be able to listen to your customers. I think oftentimes entrepreneurs want to automate everything, set everything up, and it's a lot of marketing. But I think in the early days, while you're going back to the things you were asking before around like values and mission and how do you scale, like your early customers are going to be the ones that tell you that the most. And if you have a strong CX person or half a person, like that can be really fundamental in where you decide to go and not wasting money. And the last thing I would do, it would probably be something in the marketing vein, like not, you know, Super Bowl ad, like spending lots of money, just like blasting into the stratosphere, like hoping people listen. I think these are fun things when your brand gets to a certain size, but really going after a niche, solving for this one specific group of people that I know really needs this thing, like let's go get them. It's the backpacking club at the junior high that they all, you know, need a travel bidet. And so we're going to go show them what the new Tushy travel looks like and get every junior high kid in Central Coast of California to have one of these. So just, focusing really niche and not going after like vanity metrics. Like I'm in this ad on this magazine, or I was interviewed for this thing. Like if it doesn't impact your brand in a positive way with the people that are actually buying from you, it might be a waste of your time early on.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So apart from how to put this shit together, what other books do you like recommending to people?
Yeah, I think from an experience side, customer experience, I'm a big fan of The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. It talks a lot about this concept that I've mentioned a couple of times of like when memories are created, right? Like typically it's the beginning moment of something and the end moment, right? Like our first year of college, we have lots of vivid memories of that. Second, third year, pretty forgettable. Fourth year, fifth year, when you graduate, it's like you remember that again because these are different. And so I think this is applicable to event design, customer service, really anything that's an experience. Like I was looking at the other day, Rhode, Hailey Bieber's skincare brand, she launched a new lotion or some sort of, it was a liquid product, but it came totally inside of a bath bomb. It was this huge bath bomb and you had to drop it in the tub and it created this beautiful fizzy bath. And then when it all dissolved, the product, melted away and you had just like this lotion thing. I don't even remember what it was, but I was like, this is so exciting. And everyone was reposting about it. And I was like, this is really breaking the mold of like, celebrities get stuff all the time, but to see 50 reposts of it, I mean, this is also the way the world works, but it's a new memory and it's totally different from the things that people have experienced before. And so, yeah, The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. Yeah. And there's a lot of like case studies in it. The other book I would recommend a lot is Radical Candor, just from like a leadership side of like how to share and give feedback and be really thoughtful and direct, but also, effective as a leader.
Yeah, I love that one. I do think that's it's challenging though to get to that
super
point,
challenging.
right?
Yeah.
But
it helps if your whole team reads that one, I think, so that you're all on the same page and you understand.
Yeah. You're right. Cool. And Ren, what would be the best way for people to connect with you in case they want to chat about customer experience?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty confident I'm the only Ren Fuller-Wasserman in the world. I'm also on X, formerly known as Twitter, as 𝐸𝐸, the nickname that my dad gave me when I was tooling around with him, picking as a kid. But yeah, I'm highly Googleable with this weird name.
Awesome. Ren, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so cool talking to you. I feel like I've learned so much. I feel so insightful right now. I feel like I need to just grab some paper and write down some stuff. Hear that. So yes.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I could wax poetic about CX all day. And yeah, hopefully some people are also inspired to try bidet life. HelloTushy.com.
Woohoo! Yeah. Cool. Thank you. And also, honestly, I'm looking forward to our next chat, hopefully. So let's see
looking forward to it.
Thank you. And
thank you so much, Mariana.
See you next time.
Be well.
Ready for this episode's takeaways? Number 1, for an engaging experience, map out all of your customer touchpoints and ask yourself, how can this be more special? Number 2, find the balance between striving for excellence and embracing imperfection. Understand that innovation often emerges from trial and error. Number 3, everyone in the company represents your brand, so foster a culture of trust and autonomy within your team. Empower them to take ownership of their work and decisions.
This was D2C Growth Mode, a Mailmodo original podcast. Subscribe to get the hottest takeaways from all of our original shows every 2 weeks in your inbox. Happy emailing!